This is the Gauntlet Podcast, episode number 3, Player versus Player. My name is Jason.
My name is Ferrell.
My name is Dan.
Cool. So why don't we just dive right into our first segment, which is games we have played recently. Dan, you want to get us started on that?
Sure. So holidays and all that, not a whole lot going on game-wise, but since it's been so long since we recorded last, we did manage to rack up a couple games. The first one that I was involved in was we're continuing our Monsterhearts game. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about it.
Well, maybe during the main topic, because Monsterhearts has a pretty strong player versus player component. So
that's very true.
Just to plug the main topic a little bit there.
Very good.
So
yeah.
maybe we could, maybe we should just save that. But all three of us were involved in that game, though, so that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What else?
So other than that, we played A Taste for Murder, which is a Graham Walmsley game. It's a murder investigation, not investigation game where you're not actually investigating anything, really. Like, there's not really any mechanics to investigate things. Someone's been murdered in a 1920s English country manner, and the whole point is to figure out who did it, but like who had the motive to do it, less about gathering information or anything like that. Honestly, it's a really good excuse to like sit around a table for a couple of hours and do shitty British accents.
Or stand up and do your shitty British accent.
No, that's not allowed, actually.
It's also a good excuse for finding out how many courtyards you have.
This is true. Yeah.
Yes.
How many courtyards and conservatories can an English country manor support? It turns out to be a lot.
Limitless. Yes.
Limitless, yeah. Well, so all three of us played that. I think we should talk about it for just a minute. I'm about 75% on A Taste for Murder. We have played it twice now, and both times they have been very comic and gonzo. And I really want to play the game in a way that is not comic or gonzo, but I'm not sure the rules support that. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that the rules encourage it.
Okay.
You might be able to do it if you are like brutally efficient about beating down people who stray from the tone you want.
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, there are mechanics that sort of encourage you to be incredibly melodramatic, and you're kind of competing against other people for dice, and whoever embodies whatever given emotion is required at that moment the most gets the bonuses.
And I think it's those required emotions, those sort of like, because it's a fan mail thing, right? Like you give the dice to whoever embodied that characteristic the most. That's where the tone, for me, goes into this gonzo territory, because the things that are called for are wanton destruction, for example.
Right. Or bloodletting.
Right. Yeah. Groveling.
As someone who has read a lot of British detective fiction, starting with Doyle, Agatha Christie, even some of the Americans who have taken a shot at it, I actually highly enjoyed the game for the theme and feeling. I thought that the dramatics of it, brought about by the white and black die system, actually was trying to pull that tone into it.
Did you feel like it matched?
Looking at the game, I would say mechanics-wise, 60-70% on that. The tone with the dramatics, though, was a solid 90 for me.
That's really interesting, because I've always perceived A Taste for Murder as Downton Abbey with a murder, or
right, a little more subtle.
Yeah, and it's not. It doesn't deliver on that, but it could just be. There clearly maybe Graham Walmsley was going for more what you're talking about, Ferrell. Maybe he was going for more of a different genre, a different tone, but it doesn't seem like it in the rules. But
one of the big things was the murder shakes up the entire traditional stiff upper lip. This is how things are, British societal rung.
Right.
And the dramatics usually seem to come into play when you have no dice in hand with which to fight against. And so
you're desperate.
You're desperate. Right. You're running for anything.
And so it causes you to behave desperately. I would agree with all of that, except in the book, in A Taste for Murder, in the rules, he makes a point of saying, so in this game, you have these little side scenes where the characters go off and like they have a little accusation party or whatever. He says in the book, he makes a point of saying that you're supposed to handle the accusation or the influence over the other character in a very subtle way. So, or like in a gradual way, you build up to it, right? That's a very British way of doing it. Isn't the weather lovely? And you have that for a little bit. And then you say, oh, and by the way, then you kind of move into it. So to me, like that, the fact that he wrote that statement in the rules, like suggests he's going for a certain thing. And I just don't think that the rules, like the actual hard mechanics of the game, enforce it.
Maybe the difference is if you're actually reserved British people who are operating on perhaps a less blatantly emotional
Right,
like expressing your emotions
we are
a little
filthy,
less blatantly.
knuckle-dragging Americans.
Right,
That's clearly
exactly.
what's going on here.
So I feel like maybe our definition of wanton destruction is slightly different than like a 1920s British aristocrats version of wanton destruction.
That's possibly
so.
true. I don't know. Well, I would like to try it again with being a little more strict on the tone and not being so comic, but maybe nobody would be interested in that. I don't know.
I would be interested, but it'd be something where I would give everyone one of my detective novels and be like, read this before you come. I think you have to come preloaded with that codex. So it would be a game.
I don't know if I agree with that. Maybe.
I'm not good on homework, so I don't know about that.
I want a 5-page essay on this by tomorrow.
Was that everything on your list, Dan?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, Ferrell, Ferrell, you were, most of those games were on your list too, but did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
We can go ahead and hit up Dungeon World since I've had a special experience with that. Dungeon World has actually been the first game that I have DM'd.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Prior to this, I'd been begged by a friend of mine, Thomas Roberts, to constantly run a game for him. He has always been harping on me that, but the systems we ran, 3.5, World of Darkness, etc., more traditional games, have always scared me away. DM just seemed to be like you put 10 hours of prep work into it that gets destroyed within the first 5 minutes, and then you're scrambling to run within the rules.
Right.
Dungeon World has just made DMing fun and interesting. The best way for me to describe it is I am on a stagecoach. The players on my horses.
Wow.
And instead of attempting to direct them specifically, I'm letting them take the path and just occasionally going little to the left, little to the right, slow down.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, that was everything you wanted to add?
Grimworld, maybe.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Grimworld. So, we'll just segue into my list then, because that's on my list as well.
Mm-hmm.
Last Friday we started Grimworld, which is just a skin of Dungeon World, really. Well, there's also a Fate version, but we're doing the Dungeon World version.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot to say about it because we're not really that deep into it yet. But my piece is, you can say your piece, but my piece is, we've played so much Dungeon World, probably like 200 sessions of Dungeon World at this point. Mm-hmm. It was really, really fun to play with some playbooks that are really unique and different. Like, these are really unusual playbooks. They do different kinds of things, and so far it's really cool. I'm enjoying it a lot. So.
Yeah. As a player in this game, I picked up all those character sheets and went, oh my god, how am I going to choose? Wait, this one screams at me.
Yeah.
And I do like the background of we're having to deal with the remnants of a massive planet-wide war, basically.
Right, yeah. So listeners know Grimworld is Dungeon World, but set in a sort of post-apocalyptic fantasy world. Like, everything is destroyed. Civilization is wrecked, because of some, like, supernatural catastrophe. And as a result, the world is suffused with magic, even more so than normal. And so you end up with these playbooks that are very, very, they're quite powerful, and they manipulate, like, the magic of this wrecked world, like, in a really cool way. So.
Not only that, but they'd allow, one of the things that always kind of bugged me about the Dungeon World playbooks is they have pre-selected races.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I've always been a fan of, I want to do something weird. I am playing a, Sahuagin cleric of the fire god.
Right, yeah.
And Grimworld goes, what race do you want to be? You get this nice little
There's a bunch.
Edition.
Yeah, there's like 15 different races you can choose. And everyone was like, we had a really bizarre group of characters as a result, but it was fun. It was cool. Yeah. No, normal Dungeon World is really, really like, you get to be a dwarf, an elf, or a halfling, and that's it. And a human, obviously, and that's it. So yeah, that was a fun part too. I'd love to talk more about it once we've done more of a session. We had just kind of a setup session, but
yeah. But it's a game system that I am looking highly forward to playing through.
The only other thing on my list that I want to talk about real briefly is a Dungeon World thing. We wrapped up, this is just kind of a shout out to my long-term Dungeon World players. We wrapped up our Dagger Isles campaign. It's something we don't often get to do, is have a long-term campaign that actually ends. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I don't think before the Gauntlet I ever had a campaign actually come to an end.
Yeah. So we actually had one come to an end. I mean, we did epilogues for the characters. These were characters we've been playing off and on since June. And it was fun to just kind of like, give those characters a nice big send off, and it was good. And there were characters I really learned to care about, in that sort of almost cliche way of like, oh man, I love this character so much. I wrote the Forgotten Realms, about them, or Dragonlance. That's where Dragonlance came from. It was my D&D game, right? I felt very close to these characters at the end of it. And that's not something that happens very often in the games we run. And so it was good.
What I think the traditional way to send off a character is to play them until you're so bored with them that you just get them murdered.
Yeah. This was not that way. They ended on a high note. Like, we could have definitely kept going, but it ended in a nice spot. So I was pretty pleased with it.
Yeah, and that's always something pleasing to hear about a campaign. And usually the way a campaign ends, in my past experience, is the group falls apart because someone moved. Usually the DM.
Well, cool. I don't think I have anything else on my list that I wanted to talk about. Let's go to the next segment. So we have a new segment for episode 3. It is called Giving Me Life. So the idea behind this segment is these are things that are not related to role-playing games that are giving us life. And so
it's a very poetic name.
You like that? Giving Me Life? Yeah. It's kind of if I'm being, just so you guys know, it's kind of like gay slang. It's like a slang thing to say like, oh, that's giving me life. Like, oh, this salad is giving me life, right? Like, it can be the most mundane of things that can give you life, right?
Is this like having the feels?
It's something like that, right? Yeah. So, I will start, since it's my brand new segment. So the thing that's giving me life right now, presently, I am playing this game on my PlayStation 4 called The Last of Us. I was a little late to this party. This is a game that I gather was very popular about a year ago. It won a bunch of awards on PS3. I'm now playing the PS4 version. And the thing that's giving me life is not the game so far. The game is fine. But the thing that's really giving me life is, okay, there's a character, the main character you play is this guy named Joel. It's this post-apocalyptic sort of like road trip adventure thing. He's got this girl that's with him he's trying to protect or something, and he's this guy named Joel. Here's the thing. I used to think, what kind of degenerate lowlife do you have to be to find a video game character sexually attractive? Like, you've got to be a real lowlife degenerate to find a fake animated character sexually attractive. But man, oh man, this guy Joel is so I don't know, but it's like porn practically. Okay, it's really really good. Okay, so here's the thing.
This is turning out to be a super gay segment.
Well, I know. I'm sorry. Well, it's in the spirit of the thing, right? It's all in the spirit of the thing.
Right? No, I just didn't understand going into it where we were headed with this.
Okay, so here's the thing. Rendered beautifully, like on the PS4 especially, like the textures just look so good, and and he's just a really really beautiful character. He's got this really finely chiseled features and this beautiful V-shaped torso, and they put a lot of thought into his clothes, the way his clothes fit him. He's got this beard that's really perfectly trimmed, and he's got this accent, he's really well voice acted. It's like this slight Texas twang. It's really really sexy, and
he's the same voice actor who's in every game this year. Actually.
Yeah, I can't. Troy Baker. Yeah. Troy Baker, he voices everything.
Yeah.
But he's good. And
that makes him the new
this character is
the new Nolan North.
Right, yeah, that's the other guy, right, who used to do everything, yeah. Anyway, this character Joel is just you're just man, this is such a sexy guy. I'm having these strange feelings about a video game character right now, and I don't know what that says about me, and I don't know what but it's really really upsetting. I just want to say it's giving me life. Okay, now it sounds really gross when I say it. But I am ready for our future where we have Oculus Rift virtual reality porn. I'm ready for that. I want my first one to be Joel from The Last of Us on PS4. It's really great. That's the thing giving me life. Ferrell, what's giving you life right now?
What's giving me life right now is I am playing a new 4X game on the Steam. It's called Endless Legend. I've actually spent $60 on this game. A copy.
Ooh, that's for Steam.
Wow, yeah.
This is during the sale. I bought copies for 2 friends of mine.
Oh, okay. That's different, right?
If you played Civilization, any of the, expand, exploit, exterminate type of games, build your own country, whatnot, you're familiar with the concepts of this game. What has given me life about it is the fact that this game is
sexually attractive to you. I'm turning you on physically, Ferrell. Is that what you're?
Yeah, because that's what this segment's about.
This is about sex.
Well, it does have strong dragon men. So,
I love a dragon man.
No, but what's giving me life about it is these friends of mine. We have all played Civilization 4 together online. We played Civilization 5. We were all excited about Civilization Beyond Earth, and 5 and Beyond Earth have just been kind of disappointing. It's been more of the same. We've been looking for something new, fresh, different. Endless Legend has given us that. The factions are all very unique. You can't just pick one and be like, oh, this one just gives me more money. No, this one gives me more money because you don't use food. You have to build your people with money. The diplomacy is not just, this is your culture and you can use these points to influence it. You can choose to play the game with everyone else, or you can use these points to make your empire better, and so on and so forth. It's very unique. I believe it just came out of beta in the fall winter of last year, and I've been highly excited about playing it. We've had 3 or 4 test games, and we're all just constantly going, wow, look at this.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really fun when something just you just like get this building anticipation, right? Where you're just like, oh,
not only that, but you're doing it with friends of yours, and you're all sharing that wow moment.
Cool. You guys always, every time I have a conversation with anyone in the Gauntlet about video games, I always leave that conversation feeling like I'm missing something because I don't have a Steam account and I don't play games on my computer. So, Dan, what's giving you life right now?
Well, so just to drive home the fact that we're all huge nerds, I'm also going to talk about a video game. But again, holidays, haven't had time to do anything besides video games or something, right? I'm going to use that as my excuse for why all of us use video games. It is the best time to
I will say we've all played the same game during the holidays, the family game.
Right. It's easy for us because the Gauntlet is on pause during the holidays, right?
Right.
So what do we have to do with our time if there's no Gauntlet activities, right?
Have to actually talk to people.
Heaven forbid. God. But my game actually is one that I don't think I like. I don't think it's a very good game, but I've been playing it kind of continuously because it's one of these things where it's an engine building game. It's also on Steam. It's called Banished. And you start off with a couple of little colonists or whatever, and you build your little medieval town. It's that crap. But the thing that I like about it is that I can leave it running, and, you build up your little engine. You have your guys getting resources, and they're giving them to these other guys who are making things out of the resources. And so you kind of can just leave it running forever, and then check back in and see where the simulation has broken down, like what horrible fate has happened to all of your poor little colonists.
Yeah.
And I feel like if it were a better game, it wouldn't be as satisfying because it wouldn't be like, well, when I went to sleep last night, everything looked cool, but when I came back to it this morning, they had filled all of their storage units with wool and run out of places to hold food, and so everybody died. And so just things like that happen continuously, and it's great, and I think that means it's a bad game, but I like to watch it explode. So
I think the only bad game is a game that you can't enjoy in some way, shape, or form.
I think you can enjoy bad games. I think games can be objectively bad, but you can still enjoy them.
This goes back to Pathfinder Adventure card game, which we've litigated to no end on this podcast. That is a bad game. That game is not good.
Right.
But it's fun. I have fun with it. So
it scratches all those itches to level up and get loot.
It checks a lot of boxes, but it's not good. Like, the game is mechanically not good. So I think a game can be objectively bad, but you can still have fun with it.
And so that's what I'm doing.
Cool. Awesome. So our main topic today is player versus player situations in role-playing games. From here on out, I'm going to say PvP instead of player versus player. Really quickly, I just want to define what we're talking about when we say PvP. One of two things is going on at the table when you have a PvP situation, as I am currently defining it, which is either two or more of the characters in the fiction are having a dispute in the fiction, and we need some sort of mechanical framework or construct to resolve this dispute. Okay.
Right.
Or two or more players at the table are having a dispute about fictional outcomes in the game. And we need a way of resolving those disputes. What I am definitely not talking about, just so it's clear for everyone, what I'm not talking about when I say PvP is the situation in which two players are having a dispute at the table about things that are not related to the fiction. So, for example, that player's getting on my nerves, or that player's playing the game in a certain way that bothers me, or that, the meta things that are not in the fiction, personal issues, social fallacy issues. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about disputes at the table involving fictional outcomes in the game. I want to kind of just throw that out there.
Right. Things that are covered by the rules, presumably.
Yes, presumably. Yeah.
Issues between players should never enter the game if it's a person-to-person dispute. Keep your personal life out of the game.
But I think the opposite happens, right? If you have a dispute between characters at the table, like a player versus player situation as I've defined it, I think that can lead to disputes between the players that are outside of the game, right? So that's what we're trying to avoid, right?
I've had groups break up over bad PvP.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so that's what we're going to talk about. So I want to kick off this discussion by asking the two of you something about, it's sort of a hypothetical, right? I'm a lawyer, and hypotheticals are a thing we do. So the situation is traditional role-playing, fantasy role-playing game. One player is playing a fighter. One player is playing a bard. They have an altercation or dispute that leads to physical violence between the characters. The character who's playing the fighter is the better warrior and stronger and has more armor. So he goes after the bard and ends up killing the character. It was a totally fair outcome because they were playing by the rules of the game, and that's just how it shook out. Is there a situation where that's ever a good thing, or is this always a bad thing? Thoughts?
I would say that it's only a good thing if it was initiated by the bard. Maybe that could be okay.
Okay.
If the person went into it with their eyes open of, yeah, I'm gonna die here, and they're fine with it.
But I'm gonna push the issue anyway.
Right, yeah. So if that's been made clear, kind of probably outside the game,
right,
then maybe it could be okay.
Okay.
I've never seen that happen.
Okay.
So.
Ferrell, do you have anything different to say?
My take on it is it's not a okay thing. I think this is always a bad situation because the outcome of this is that someone feels they've been robbed. Right. Especially in a traditional game where losing a character is a huge resource loss.
So let me make a devil's advocate argument then. If both players knew what they were getting into, they knew that this is going to end up with basically my character sheet versus your character sheet, and we both know that, and we still go at it, does the bard player who gets killed, do they have a leg to stand on as far as like being butthurt about it? Or have they totally just like if they feel like, yeah, sure, we played by the rules and my character wasn't as good and so he died, but I'm still really mad about this. Like, I feel like I was let down by the rules in some way, or the outcome feels disingenuous, or whatever. Like, do you think he has leg to stand on at that point? Like, if he understood the consequences of what could happen?
Well, I think he could probably make an argument that the game system itself probably wasn't set up in a way that made it fair, that it was inherently unfair. Okay. That even playing by the rules, it was unfair to his character. Because his character just, like, the rules don't allow him to play to his strengths in that situation. Right. So.
Okay, so I just want to kind of get your guys' thoughts on that, because I think that this is a situation that in some role-playing game groups this happens, right? Especially if you have a GM who's not very good at maintaining control of his story, right? Right. like in a real trad game, like, you know, the GM is supposed to have a little bit more like control over how things progress, right? And sometimes GMs just get steamrolled. It's just a thing that happens. Yep. And I think when we're talking about player versus player, I've been thinking about this, like, what causes bad player versus player outcomes. I've been saying player versus player the whole time, even though I said I was going to say PvP. The thing that leads to bad PvP outcomes, I think big picture, ultimately what it is to me is if the game was not designed with PvP in mind, or if PvP is not a feature of the game or a principal consideration of the game's rules, then PvP outcomes tend to be disappointing. They tend to not be great, because I think you end up with one of two situations. You get a situation where, in the worst case, in my opinion, the GM tries to handle it like in a very, very like doesn't really engage in mechanics at all, like such as they might be. He just says, well, why don't you guys just hash it out at the table, right? Like, the two of you are just going to go at it at the table, like, especially like in a social situation, right? Like between the characters, you two just argue it out, and we'll come to a decision as a group, right? Right. Yeah. That's bad, right? Like that's not going to be a good outcome, because there's lots of different reasons why. We can talk about that, but the other thing I think where the situation you kind of end up with is you end up with kind of like my hypothetical, where it's my character sheet versus your character sheet, and it's kind of just inherently unfair, especially like in a fantasy game, because there are some characters who are just meant to do certain things in the party. Right. And it may not, if you're the fighter, it might not be your bluff stat or your charisma may not be that high. And so the bard has a huge advantage in this regard if it's a sort of argument type conflict. If it's a combat conflict, the fighter has the upper hand, right?
But I've never even seen it come up where it was allowed to use social skills against another PC. It always seems like that's, in a lot of cases, because that's like taking the power away from taking agency away from another player's character.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think GMs are going to solve this problem in one of two ways. They're going to either say, so Burning Wheel is a great example. In Burning Wheel, that's how you handle PvP. You say, who's got the higher will? Roll your will. Right? Like, roll your will. Did you roll high enough on your will? Nope. Well, then this guy did. This guy won the roll. We're doing what he wants to do. That's straight up how it's handled in Burning Wheel, right?
In 3.5, Pathfinder, etc., what you had were things like your bluff, your diplomacy, your charisma, and then the other person had a skill called Sense Motive, or something like
right,
that.
Yeah.
And you would roll that off, but Sense Motive is a skill that comes up very little use, so unless you made a character with that in mind, you're probably not going to succeed.
that always was stupid, right? Because then you have this disconnect between what you know and what your character knows, which is fine in some situations. But if it's like, I know that this other player is constantly screwing me over, but I have to sit here and play my character like he's a dumbass.
Right, yeah. Well, so that's the thing. I think when you do a character sheet versus character sheet thing, where we're just pitting our stats or our skills against each other, I think you end up with a situation where essentially like your character is being like mentally enslaved, right? Like the die roll went a certain way, therefore like he's captured to this idea. There's nothing I can do about it, right? Like
it's that rage of, as a player, I know these things, but I can't act upon them because my character can't know them. And so you're just sitting there getting frustrated that you're being forced.
But I think the other thing is equally bad, right? Where the GM just says, well, just be in character, speak in your character's voice right now and have this argument, like have this discussion with the group or have this discussion with the other character. Because then you end up with a situation where it just comes down to the ability of that player. Not a fictional thing at all. His character might not be this way at all. He might be playing a dumb barbarian, but because he's a good talker, or because he has more social influence at the table, he's able to get what he wants out of the situation, right? So I think those are the two, I think in both cases, it's bad. I think the outcomes are bad. There's just no getting around it. Do you guys have any, that's kind of the premise of this conversation, I guess, or at least why PvP can go poorly in a game. Do you guys have anything to add to that?
I think one of the issues with PvP in a game, PvP seems to crop up unless the game system is designed to create that situation. It crops up because people have problems at the table with each other, and it's something that's unresolved that's just been building and building and building, and then blows up in this situation. And touching on where you were talking about, the GM sits back and says, okay, both of you hash it out, and it comes down into basically social skill. And I think a lot of people in general have problems confronting, arguing, debating with other people. It's something that seems to be a skill that is not just taught poorly, but actually repressed in quite a few people.
So what you're saying, just to clarify, just to put a fine point on it, it sounds like what you're saying is the sorts of people who have traditionally played role-playing games might be social introverts. They might be, dare I say it, nerds or geeks or whatever. And they may not have the skill set in general just to handle conflict, right?
Yeah. We have stereotypes out there of the nerd, the geek being, the poor speaker, stuttering, doesn't know how to act around other people, says inappropriate things. And on top of that, we have, the geek social fallacy type stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And all those are stereotypes and kind of jokes, but they do stem from the root that a lot of people who have traditionally played role-playing games, especially during the, chainmail, second ed, 3.5 type era, are the type of people that aren't really good at dealing with other people just because of past experience, past abuses.
So, okay. All right. So that's an interesting point. I think that's true. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Dan? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I could see that being an issue, but even beyond that, I think that the rules themselves are set up in most of these games to make it where just talking things out is not going to solve it. Because, in a lot of cases, the whole idea is that your characters are all together trying to do this thing together, and you're trying to work together and all of this stuff, and they're all stuck together, right? And so, there's probably a lot of situations that have come up in games where the characters would just walk away from each other and never talk to each other again. But because you're the party,
you must be together.
Now you have to be together, and so then you have to come up with this weird, ridiculous justification for how you can either try and mesh your two opposing viewpoints, or you're just gonna have somebody be like, well, I'm gonna stab you.
Right, yeah. So, okay, so that kind of goes back to my initial, or not my initial, but when I said that, I've been thinking about this topic for a little bit for the past few days whenever we decided to do it. And what I keep coming back to is if the game does not have PvP in mind, or if the game has not had a lot of real careful thought into PvP specific rules or PvP specific mechanics for its rule sets, the PvP ends up seeming wrong, right? In a fantasy adventure game, they're, like you said, they're supposed to be together and they can't leave.
Right, exactly.
And so the PvP, it just comes off wrong. It's not a satisfying ending. There's no, the rules are not, you're right. They inherently cannot resolve the problems in a satisfactory way unless, again, a lot of thought have been put into PvP specific aspects of the rule set.
PvP, especially for social situations, always felt kind of kludged on to the back end. It felt like they feel like in most of the traditional games, they went, oh crap, we need a way for someone to handle this situation. Just glue this on.
Can we talk about...
Or just maybe use the same rules for monsters.
Right, yeah.
This will probably work fine if you do it to each other.
It's an issue with attempting to use skills made to work on NPCs on a PC.
Right. That's kind of a separate issue, but yeah, it's basically, yeah, I get what you're saying. Can I talk about second edition for a minute? Because you just reminded me of something.
Go right on ahead.
In second edition, the skills that are not your weapons are called non-weapon proficiencies. They're not called skills. They're called non-weapon proficiencies. That name alone says that all the game is really concerned with is weapon proficiencies, right? Like the fact that we call it non-weapon proficiencies just highlights the fact that we just tacked this on. And it's optional too. That's not even a thing you have to do in second ed. That's an optional rule set. And so, like, yeah, you're right, Ferrell. Like, they've pasted on this, like, some of these social things to some of these games.
And I believe in second ed, most of the social situations were just roll your charisma.
I don't remember. It's been a while, but I do remember that there were non-weapon proficiencies that covered things like argumentation and debate and things like that, right? In which case you would tap that. And I think it just ends up being a stat roll. I don't quite recall. But
second ed has been long gone.
A long time, yeah.
We buried that dinosaur a long time ago, and thank God. You know what?
Actually, I would play second ed. If somebody wanted to play second ed with me, I would totally play it again just for nostalgia's sake. But
that does bring up one of the biggest issues with PvP. Taking away player agency. I can't do anything because you have limited my character's actions because of the situation.
I think that's basically what we're getting to in terms of like problems with PvP, right? Like these are things that deprotagonize you. If the rules don't seem satisfyingly fair, you're going to feel like you've lost agency, particularly in the social stuff, right? Like, yeah, that's like, you rolled your charisma, yours was higher than mine, and so you win. I mean, like that's, it's like mind control. Nobody likes that. Okay, cool. Well, so why don't we talk about how some games have tried to improve on PvP? Like games that have like tried to specifically address PvP, but maybe didn't quite knock it out of the park. For me, it's Burning Wheel. I've played a lot of Burning Wheel, and so I have some experience with it, and I can speak to it.
Burning Wheel was actually something I saw pop up a lot on the searches of how do you handle this? Well, look at Burning Wheel. Look at Burning Wheel.
I hope it wasn't popping up as a good way of handling it, because I don't think it was actually very good. There are like two basic systems in which you can handle player versus player situations. You can just have a straight, I roll my oratory skill or my argument skill or whatever against your will, right? And we see who comes out on top, right? That's really just a trad way of handling it, right? That's, and trust me, it's never satisfying. It's the ultimate, like, just mind control thing, right? But Burning Wheel has this other thing, this, like, subsystem, which it's lauded for. People like it. It is fun, but I'm not sure it really solves the problem of, like, satisfying PvP. So it's called the Duel of Wits. It is a scripted social combat thing. It most often came up between NPCs and the PC, but you could very easily, it could totally be used for player versus player as well. And it doesn't quite knock it out of the park in terms of being a satisfying outcome because it's really complex. Like everything in Burning Wheel, it's super complex. The subsystems anyway are very, very complex. Lots of different die rolls. There's this crazy scripting thing you do. There's lots of different possible skills you can use, and you have to really, really grok it. You have to really know how it works to get anything out of it.
If I remember correctly, I just did a quick read through the Duel of Wits supplement. It was basically, you set up, it sounded almost like a trading card game. You set up your three attack cards.
They're blind. Right. Yeah, they're three blind. It's just like Mouse Guard when we played Mouse Guard, right? You have you have your 3 or 4 blind actions, and then you compare each action.
It's kind of rock, paper, scissors.
It's rock, paper, scissors. You look at the chart, right?
I set my trap card face down.
Right. Except it's way more complicated than Mouse Guard because you're not just saying I attack or I parry or I defend. You have to say like, I use a retort, or I make a point, or I obfuscate, right? Like, yeah.
And so what happens in the fiction if the player can't obfuscate? If the player doesn't have the skills, like, personally to obfuscate?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It doesn't work, right? Like, it's not
So
good.
You just hand wave that and say, my character's being incredibly obfuscating.
You hand wave it and then you roll the appropriate dice. Like, it's it never really comes off right. And ultimately what it just boils down to is, it just comes down to, again, just die rolls. Right. And one person wins and one person loses. The one good thing that the Burning Wheel Duel of Wits thing does that is redeemable is you do get to negotiate an outcome. And that's something we'll talk about later with a game that I'd like to talk about called In a Wicked Age. But if you lose the duel of wits and you didn't get completely blown out, like you got a couple hits on the other guy, you are able to negotiate for getting a little something for yourself too, right? And so that can be like a more satisfying way of handling PvP, because then it feels like you didn't just totally lose, like you got something out.
Yeah, that sounds like a big improvement, honestly.
It is a big improvement, except the reason why it really doesn't work is because the Duel of Wits itself is so goddamn long and complex. Like, it's so complex, and ultimately, like, you feel like you could have just done it with a die roll, like a single die roll, right? Like, it just doesn't feel that good.
Reading through it, it looked very much a case of, if I'm a better reader of people and I kind of know what your normal strategy for this type of thing is, I know what your skills are.
Yeah, that could be a thing. Yeah.
And also, since we're rolling random number generator, did it favor me today?
Well, so yeah, I mean, well, your first point is right. Like in some ways, it's a lot about like, you know, knowing what the other guy is going to do, but you know, Burning Wheel, like, I think
that's so board gamey.
It is. Well, you know, Luke Crane, who designed Burning Wheel, he's very, very explicit about his games being games, right? Like, we are playing games,
right?
And games are competitions, and there are systems, and he's really, really explicit about that. Some people love it. Some people don't love it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I want to love it, but I just have a hard time loving it because it ends up being just so goddamn complex, and it's more trouble than I want to deal with. So anyway, yeah, Burning Wheel is kind of like it's kind of a middle, a little bit of in the middle place. It's got this otherwise not extremely satisfying system because it's so complex and it just feels sort of arbitrary at the end anyway. But you have this little like, oh, let's negotiate to a halfway outcome, or let me negotiate something from my side too, right? Which was kind of an interesting thing.
And in real life, I think that's actually something that that's the social lubricant. Even if we're having a fight over something, if I get something out of it, I don't feel as bad. I don't have as hard a feeling, and I'm probably not going to push anymore.
Yeah, well, it lets you save a little face, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, you didn't just get completely beaten.
Right, yeah.
Right, so.
I think that there are, like I've been saying repeatedly, I think there are games that were designed with PvP in mind, or there are games that have very specific mechanics tailored on PvP. They're not just the mechanics you use on NPCs, you know, pasted onto the player versus player conflicts. They are specific player versus player mechanics. Those are the games I'd like to talk about right now. Not as any kind of response to these other games, because I think it's just maybe two different types of games. But I think for just sake of like having a discussion about what makes a good PvP system or what's a good PvP rule, I think it might be worth talking about some of those games. And so I had kind of like broadly separated them into two categories. Games that have in-fiction mechanics that allow you to resolve the conflict between the characters, and then games that have more of like a meta mechanic between the players at the table, which allow you to determine the outcome for the characters in the fiction. They're pretty closely related, but they are slightly different. Do you guys have any games you want to kick off with in terms of like games that use in-fiction mechanics to solve PvP issues?
I'd love to talk about Monsterhearts, honestly.
Well, let's do it, since that's a game we've all played together recently. Okay. I think that's a good one.
PvP has always been a large issue with me in gaming. I do not like it, or rather I would say until this most current session of Monsterhearts, I did not like it. I did not like having to fight against everyone else.
Right.
I've always felt awkward about it.
Right.
I have to worry about, you know, how much am I pushing? Am I going to piss someone off? And I will say it isn't just, you know, I played Monsterhearts and, oh my god, the heavens opened up.
Right.
I played 2 sessions of Apocalypse World and 2 sessions of Monsterhearts prior to this.
Right.
And none of those really clicked for me. I kind of...
When by sessions, just to clear up, you mean like entire campaigns, right?
Not, yeah.
Not gaming sessions.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Apologies.
You've played whole like 5 or 6 session campaigns, right?
Exactly. But in this most current one, what clicked for me is I went simple. I went through the playbooks and went, this is a simple, I put a needle point on this and can charge forward with this idea.
Right.
And then when I got in the game, I followed through. I trusted everyone at the table and the storyteller to keep me in line and to speak up when I may have gone too far, but I went for the character concept, which in this Monsterhearts session, I'm playing the werewolf.
Right.
And so I'm playing...
Beautiful, sexy, hairless werewolf.
Yeah. The character sheet says, I want to control everything. I want to have it all.
Right.
I reach out and grab it and it should be mine and I dominate it.
You were taking the advice of because each of those skins, or playbooks or whatever in Monsterhearts, they have that like advice on how to play the character. And you were, I will confirm that you were doing that. You were very much like playing towards that. And that's a good thing. I will confirm what you've just said about your personal experience. And I hope you don't mind me saying it, but I've played lots and lots of games with you, Ferrell, a bunch. And there are times, and I think we all do it to some degree, but like there are times when something has happened in a PvP sort of way in the story games we play, and I can tell for like 10 seconds you're not okay with it. I could see it on your face, like, oh man, I can tell Ferrell's not really okay with what just happened. But then you seem to get over it and you keep going. But like I have noticed that about you. And so that's interesting that you've had that sort of like transition, or I don't know if that's the right word, but like that sort of change of heart about it, I guess.
Yeah. Touching back on the previous, people are not very good with social situations, getting in these situations. I have never really, until my current stage of life, been okay dealing with other people. And like I was saying, I trust everyone in the group to put down the X card when I go too far.
Well, that's interesting because I've always said that really good role-playing game groups have this one thing in common, and that is that the players do trust each other. And, trust is not something I'd really thought about in terms of this discussion, but it occurs to me now that you mentioned this, that could be a lot of it, right? Like, how much of it do you guys think is the fact that we're really good at this in general because we do kind of trust each other. We've played with each other a lot. Like, or do the mechanics have more to say than that? Like, can the mechanics enforce you being good players?
I think that it's probably a little of both. I think that, it helps to have a game group that you actually trust to, play it with the right mindset.
Right, yeah.
And that, people aren't going to get pissed off at you. And like any antagonism between your characters isn't going to filter away from the table and affect your actual relationships.
Right.
But something that we should really focus on, or at least bring up, is the fact that the games that we're talking about that are good examples of PvP have switched the focus from your goal is not to be awesome. Your goal is to be interesting.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And so it's okay if you fail in a lot of these cases in ways that it's not if your goal is just to be awesome and I need to be the awesomest at the table and I need to hit the hardest and all of that.
As one of the newer story game converts, I've been playing with you guys for a while, but until I met the Gauntlet, I had no idea story games existed. But one of the things that story games have taught me that I've enjoyed, the reason I push them on people, every time someone brings up, we're playing D&D, we're playing Pathfinder, it's like, try Dungeon World.
Right, yeah.
Failure is fun.
Right. That's good. You guys are really hitting on something here. This is good. This could be the answer, right? Games that, maybe it's not that the games focus on PvP like I've been saying. Perhaps it's that there are games that deprioritize success, right?
One of the biggest issues we were talking about with player versus player conflict is if you win, I lose. There's zero-sum games.
Right. Indeed, yeah.
In story gaming, if I fail, everyone at the table is still winning, including me, because I get to put that in and we all get to create more narrative out of that failure.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, no,
even in Dungeon World, character death, and this is something I like in Grimworld, where character death gets a massive...
It's really cool, yeah.
Yeah, really cool... It's like, I really want to push it because if my character dies, I get to do this amazing thing.
They have death moves and these really cool things that happen. Yeah.
I get to do this amazing thing and make my mark on the story we are telling.
Right. Well, this is interesting. It's not really where I thought the conversation was going to go, but it's really, really good.
It's kind of a lead into the system in a Wicked Age, right? In a Wicked Age, you're actually dealing with like what's best for the story, right? That's what you're actually, the PvP is over. It's not even necessarily in fiction in a lot of cases, right?
So I played, I think of the three of us, Ferrell, I don't think you've ever played it.
No, if you don't mind, just me, and for people who don't know, give me a quick rundown on
Sure.
Wicked
Age. So in a Wicked Age, Dan, you've played a little bit. I've played a fair amount, a lot. It's a sword and sorcery fantasy game. You play a group of characters in a certain period of time, but just for a single session. And in the next session, you play possibly some of the same characters, but most likely different characters in a totally different time period, but in the same world. So we may see character X in time period A, and then in the next session we see character X like 100 years later as a ghost or something, right? It tells it's sort of like a strange narrative linearity whereby you jump around going forward in time and backwards in time. That's the basic premise of the game thematically. Where Dan is going in terms of like the mechanics of it, In a Wicked Age is really truly kind of like a hybrid of like in-fiction mechanics and then meta mechanics. Okay. So like things that the characters are doing to each other and then things that players are doing to affect the characters' lives, right? It starts out with a conflict between the characters. Like someone takes an action. There's no goal in mind, but someone just takes an action. So like, I swing a punch at you, right? Or I try to sneak the keys off of your belt loop so that I can break out of prison, right? I take some sort of action. We have a little die rolling thing whereby we go back and forth. But what we're rolling for is not for a resolution of the conflict. What we're rolling for is who has the advantage in the ultimate negotiation. So we are rolling dice to try to gain advantage, and you might roll to the point where you gain like the outright advantage, like you've won. If you win outright, you don't get any kind of fictional outcome. In fact, all you get is, as a player, you get the right to enforce a very strict penalizing mechanical penalty on the other character, but you don't get your fictional outcome. You just get the ability to hurt their character on their sheet. But what that's supposed to do is it's supposed to encourage the other player to negotiate with you. And this is getting to what Dan's point was. You negotiate for what is the best thing to happen in the story, right? And so everyone is satisfied with the outcome. You know, even though I may have been on the weaker end of the negotiation, we've managed to reach a point in the negotiation where we've got a nice, satisfactory fictional outcome. And so it's cool. It's good. It works really well.
And it's specifically not what's best for your character in a lot of cases.
Right.
And I think that's important.
That's a good point. Yeah. So what you're ultimately trying to achieve with your character is you have these listed, what's called their best interests, but their best interest is a little misleading because it's what their best interests are in terms of like good storytelling. It's not like, so like my character's best interest might be to end up being assassinated, you know, because he's an evil tyrant king, right? It's in the story's best interest for that to happen to him, right? And so so it kind of goes back to this idea that you guys are hitting on of like, it deprioritizes like my character's success, right? What we're aiming towards is good fictional outcomes. We're not aiming towards good outcomes for my specific character.
Something story gaming always seems to do that I've noticed is the character is not important. It's okay for your character to lose, to die.
Right.
You aren't losing anything as a player.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key concepts in PvP situations that causes so many problems. It's when you lose, you're losing not only in the character sense, but in the player sense of resources, time, etc.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Were there any other games we wanted to mention, like things worth mentioning right now? I wouldn't mind going back to Monsterhearts for just a hot minute, because we didn't talk about the real specific mechanical things of Monsterhearts that make it a good PvP system.
That's true. Yeah. Or did you want to talk about Dungeon World? Because I think that has a terrible PvP system.
Oh, I disagree. So, let's talk about it.
Okay.
So, we'll ditch Monsterhearts for a minute. Okay, so Dungeon World, we started playing Dungeon World a couple years ago, and Dan and I played in the same game for about maybe 20 sessions or so, 25 sessions, something like that. At that time, in those early days of Dungeon World, I agreed with you. I did not think the PvP worked very well in Dungeon World, and I felt like it was a problem of, well, it was kind of a classic trad problem of these characters are in a party together and they can't just leave, right? So they must have, we must have a way of resolving this, and that's not going to be good for anybody. And in fact, our first campaign of Dungeon World ended because we had a shitty PvP situation.
It did, yeah.
It ended in a shitty PvP situation. I have since played many, many sessions of Dungeon World, and I have actually just fairly recently, I have come around on Dungeon World's PvP. I think that mechanically it actually handles it just fine. But before I give that argument, why do you think it doesn't work?
Well, I think it doesn't work because it's like the old D&D system, but even worse.
Why?
Because in this case, it's not even like character sheet versus character sheet. It's like whoever acts first. So whoever can trigger their move first.
Right.
Because I'm in a much better situation in Dungeon World if I'm the one triggering my hack and slash than if you are, right? And so it encourages, if you feel the situation's coming to a head, it encourages being an asshole and stabbing first.
And trigger the move.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to disagree with you, and here's why. In fact, I think it works really well because we've had it come up actually a lot lately. We've had a lot of situations where, not necessarily combat, but lots of like PvP things, like where I'm trying to steal something from this guy, or I'm trying to like steal this guy's love interest or whatever. We had a lot of situations like that come up. But it all kind of is the same thing. You're just triggering moves, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So here's what happens. You role play it out, and this is per the rules. Like, it took me a while to reach this point, but this is how the game is supposed to go. This is not me like finagling it or anything. This is rules as written. You are supposed to have a conversation about you're supposed to talk about what your character's doing. They're talking about how their character's responding. And the GM should be listening, as always in Dungeon World, he should be listening for a move to get triggered. Okay? This is kind of in line with what you're saying. Right. But here's the thing. The thing that makes it work is the interfere move. So yes, you may trigger your hack and slash, or yes, you may trigger whatever the move is that's causing you to be the aggressor, so to speak. But the other guy gets to roll interfere. Okay. So interfere is the key. The move is called aid or interfere, but we usually just see the aid. we tend to gloss over in our minds the interfere part because it seems so counterintuitive to a party-based adventure. The interfere is critically important because you then respond by rolling interfere. I want to interfere with you hacking and slashing at me, right?
Okay.
And so you roll interfere, you roll plus bonds, your bonds that you have with that.
So because, I don't believe you have enough respect for the forest, that will affect my roll.
Bonds are a whole separate issue. Bonds are separate. We've litigated this before, but Dungeon World bonds are dumb. But whether you're rolling bonds or rolling something else, the point is
discounting the bonus.
Yeah.
Continue.
You're rolling a move, you're rolling interfere. And if you succeed at all, that's a 7 or higher on the 2d6, you get to impose a -2 penalty on their roll.
Okay.
That the move they triggered, right? So if you triggered hack and slash or whatever, and I succeed on the interfere roll, then you get a -2.
Okay.
-2 is a big penalty, right?
Sure.
Statistically, it's a very big penalty.
Right.
And so that -2, there's a very good chance that -2 is going to it's going to push you into a partial success or a failure, right?
Okay.
But I could also fail on my interfere. I could roll a 6.
Right, and you're probably more likely to fail on your interfere than to fail on your hack and slash.
I mean, I guess it depends on
because you're not going to have as big of a bonus
Well,
based on your bonds.
It depends. I mean, it depends.
It
kind of
depends.
depends. It kind of
To some extent, it depends.
depends. But I think statistically, they're probably pretty close. But in any event, whether my interfere forces you to get a 6- or whether my interfere roll on its own gets a 6-, at some point per the rules of the game, that's when the GM gets to step in and dictate the outcome, right? So if it causes your hack and slash, if it causes you to have a -6, I could say, you know what? You got a 6-. Sorry. Per the rules of the game, I get to make my move. And my move is I'm going to separate you, and so that means the party ties you up or whatever, right? Or, sorry, you tried to interfere with them and you got a 6-. If I'm feeling really punitive, I can say you're going straight to last breath. Or I could just say, hey, go ahead and you don't even have to roll hack and slash. Just roll your damage, right?
So is that satisfying though then?
Well,
to have
I don't know.
GM fiat say now your character's dead?
I don't know if it's satisfying, but it is a way of resolving it. I mean, it's a way of
it's a way, I'll give you that.
But so here's the thing. The bigger problem is not Dungeon World's mechanics. I don't think it's Dungeon World's mechanics that are the issue. I think it's this issue we've been talking about already, which is...
No, I totally agree.
It just doesn't make any sense in this type of game, right? But we used to say about Dungeon World that it just had you couldn't resolve things at all. You just had no mechanical way of resolving. That's not true. You do.
That's fair. Yeah.
So whether you like that or not, okay. But I think as long as the GM is kind of explaining possible outcomes and saying, well, this is what could happen, this is what can happen, and everyone knows what's at stake. It's not great, but
To make a point on this, something I find interesting while you two are talking, I've been thinking about it. The aid and interfere move are not limited to just the two people having the issue. The rest of the party is allowed to aid and interfere as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And also the aid and interfere moves are relying on bonds. The more bonds, the more ties you have to a character,
right?
The bigger the bonus you have towards your aid or interfere move. I find those interesting because that gives the rest of the table a bit of a currency, I guess, to come in and it's a 4-person party. All three of us are interfering with your move to try to attack this one person.
I don't know if that's rules is written. Don't quote me on that, but that may not be allowed. Because then you could be imposing a -6 penalty on that
Right,
guy.
yeah, that seems weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's in the rules. Well, you may be right, Ferrell. I'm not sure. I think it's never come up that way in play, so I'm not.
No. But you see what I'm talking about. The party can actually start weighing in. The table can weigh in.
Yeah, so I guess it would let you democratize it a bit.
I see what you're saying there. Yeah. But I think I basically agree with you though, Dan, which is to say that in fact, the reason why it doesn't feel satisfying in Dungeon World is I don't think it's because of the mechanics.
Right.
I think it's because
it's not set up to tell that story.
It's not set up to tell that story. Yeah.
Dungeon World has always been more of a cooperative.
We are a party of adventurers going down to the dungeon killing monsters.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's Dungeon World.
So why do they have a paladin?
Yeah, well, let's not go into that. Let's not go into how your character's actions destroyed our game of Dungeon World, Dan. No.
I feel that the situation my character was put in destroyed the party.
No, I'm kidding. No, I actually really loved that campaign of Dungeon World. I don't care that it ended poorly. Anyway,
But see, that was me getting tired of my character and sending him to his death.
No, that's true. You did the thing. Yeah, you did the thing. Okay, so Dungeon World's a thing. We kind of covered Dungeon World. we've said In a Wicked Age, which I think In a Wicked Age is a great way of doing PvP. But again, that game is all about PvP. There's nothing else to do in that game. The game is only a PvP game. So it's kind of maybe an unfair example, but it's a good one of like how to do it well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I don't know that that's necessarily unfair to say that if the game is designed specifically with PvP first, then it's
right. Yeah,
you know, that's the situations you should be doing PvP in.
I want to hit Monsterhearts again. I appreciated Ferrell's explanation of why he enjoys Monsterhearts from a PvP standpoint, but I want to talk about the real specific mechanic in Monsterhearts, which is a very good one. In Monsterhearts, Monsterhearts is a game about sexy teenage monsters who act like assholes towards each other. That's basically what Monsterhearts is about.
Basically, it's being a teenager.
It's being a jerk-faced teenager, but you're a monster. It has
teenage listeners. If you're a teenager and you're offended by this,
do write in. Okay, so Monsterhearts has a really terrific mechanic. It uses this currency called strings. They represent your character's emotional power over other characters. You gain them so there's a move called Turn Someone On, that allows you to like do some sexy on them, and it causes them to have weird feelings about you, and that equals strings. It's your emotional power over that character, right? You can spin the string in a variety of ways to fuck with the other guy, right? And that's what's really cool about it. So, well, there's a couple things you can do with it, but one of the things you can do is I can spin this string to straight up put a penalty on your roll. I can spend a string to force you to hold steady, which is a move. Like you want to do thing X, but I can spend a string. I can spend my emotional power on you to cause you to hesitate. Or even better, you can spend the string to offer the other player an option and say, hey, if you do this thing for me, or this thing that I want, if your character does this thing I want your character to do, you'll get to mark an experience point, right? And that's a terrific incentive to at least consider it and to take the deal. I love this way of PvP because you can engage with it as much as you want. If you really want to go hard on the other player, you can choose to spend those strings, right? You can stack them up and do multiple things, right? You can choose to engage it as much as you want. You're giving up your control over the person though, right? You're basically giving up some control over that person to get what you want from them, right? Or to fuck with them. And the other player, they can sort of counter engage with their own strings, right? And so I just like it. It really, and I think that last session of Monsterhearts we played, it shook out really, really well.
It's basically, I have my emotional coins, and I mean, it's a currency system.
Of course, yeah.
It allows me to go, I see this outcome is valuable. I wish to put my resources, my currency.
I'm going to put my currency towards that. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think I like that. I like PvP systems that do that because you have to make a decision, right? You've got to make a sort of a resource decision. Yeah. You have anything to say about any of that?
No, I think we covered it.
Cool. Awesome. Well, Monsterhearts, In a Wicked Age, those are really, really high watermarks for me in terms of PvP mechanics. I know you had some that you want to talk about, Dan, that were like PvP where like there's a winner at the end of the game, right? That's interesting to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, PvP that's not at all in fiction, right? So everything is outside of the fiction. It's not even necessarily like our characters are going at it, but we're keeping track of it at the table and somebody's going to win at the end.
Right.
And I feel like that could be a tricky needle to thread in some situations.
Okay.
Because nobody wants to lose, right?
Right.
So, and like actually saying this guy wins.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like it could be a really dangerous thing, but I've never felt like we've had trouble with any of these games.
And it could be for all the reasons we've listed. Like we trust each other, or the game is just good at enforcing or the game, it's just a satisfying mechanical outcome. Could be for any number of reasons. Why don't we talk about specific games you're talking about?
Sure. So, I think one of the most obvious ones, at least from the ones that we've played a decent amount, is Becoming.
Right.
Which kind of inverts the normal one GM, however many players thing, and there's kind of one player and 3 GMs.
Right.
But it's competitive between everyone, where you're acquiring victory points throughout the game, and at the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points gets to decide how things end. Like, they get to wrrite the end of the story.
The ending of the story, right.
And so you're actually out of character, you're fighting over who's going to decide how the story actually ends.
Well, and we've played that a fair amount, and the PvP in that one gets pretty goddamn vicious in some, like the actual mechanical engagement of the PvP gets a little it's almost like board gamey in a way. Like it's competitive. Like you're trying to win. Like I'm trying to get these points.
And so I think it's interesting that we've played a game where it was very much like that, and then one game that it wasn't.
That's true.
And it was a lot less satisfying when we weren't really being cut through.
Right.
Because the idea is that not only are the three GMs competing with each other, but they're all sort of competing against the player.
Right, yeah.
And if you view it like that, where it's like us three against this one guy,
it's not as good.
It's not as good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's only good if you're viewing the competition as I'm a GM character, I'm playing against the other GM characters and the player.
Right.
Like
I lose just as much if the player wins or if another GM wins.
Right. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, Becoming kind of really, really inverts a little bit about what we've been talking about, because what you're saying, and I agree, I remember which game you're talking about. You're saying that like when we weren't fully engaging the competitive aspects of Becoming, the real hard competitive PvP aspects, we didn't like the game as much.
Yeah.
The story wasn't enough to like lead to our satisfaction. And that's interesting, right?
So just so I'm aware of what we're saying is the three GMs were all against the player in that unsatisfying game.
Yes. They're called, and they weren't like fighting against each other. They were just, and they totally steamrolled the player, right?
Yeah.
Like there was,
And I think that does touch upon some stuff we've said before where, it's because in that it was a team versus one person. It's still set up, it's still set up that seesaw of, one person rises, the other one falls.
One person outright.
As opposed to the one where everyone was fighting, it's a four-way battle. The loss is shared among more people, and you don't feel as bad.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think you're right. Like, I think that was part of it for sure. But it still kind of goes against like everything that I've come to understand about story games, which is as long as the story we're telling is good, we should all be cool with it. But for some reason, it's not in Becoming. You're right. Like, the better games of Becoming are the ones where we're all like really, really fully engaging that competitive thing with each other.
Well, and I think that like just the way the mechanics work require that, right? Because the player is so badly outnumbered that unless he can turn the GMs against each other, then he's going to lose. Yeah. And he's going to lose badly.
Right.
So, and nobody wants that, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Becoming is a good example of an unusual PvP game and one that kind of turns some of our sort of like accepted way of like playing games and being in a story game, kind of defies it. Any other games?
So one of the other games that we played that where you're actually kind of keeping score throughout the whole thing is the Committee for the Exploration of Mysteries.
Oh, right. And
just remind me. That's the one where we have the Ouija board and you have to
No. That's Society of Dreamers. No, Committee is a pulp adventure game.
So
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of game.
Exactly.
That one.
Yes.
So it's a great game. You're sitting around drinking beers or whatever, and there's a pacing mechanic that's like how low your drinks get determines like what's kind of happening in the game. Great game.
It's a bit of a lark because the characters are all supposed to be in the fiction sitting around the table talking about this adventure they had.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but as you're going through, you're sort of acquiring victory points in some way, right? That's a thing that happens.
Right. I believe that's true.
So at the end of the game, the important thing is at the end of the game, whichever player has the most victory points, their character achieves their goal.
Right.
And whoever has the least, their character definitely does not.
Yeah.
And so, the outcome for your character is dependent on how well you're playing the game.
Right.
And so there is, in some ways, there's a clear loser and there's a clear winner.
Yeah.
Which, again, is something that in a lot of cases I would shy away from.
Right.
But in this, I mean, again, it's a thing where you're still setting the terms of your defeat in the end. Like the loser, the winner's not getting to say, oh, and then your character dies in a plane crash.
Right.
Like the loser says how he doesn't get what he wanted.
Right, exactly.
And
you have control.
Right. So you still have control over your own character.
I think that's what makes it
There's just a few limitations on it.
I think that's what makes it okay.
Yeah.
Well, and also in a lot of these games where there is a definite winner at the end, I think the journey helps, right? Like,
sure.
Did we have a good time when was the getting to this point, like the fun part? Like the final girl has a winner at the end, right? It's somewhat arbitrary, but there is a winner who gets to determine the final outcome.
That's true.
But you don't care about it, right? Like it's like no one gives a shit who gets to decide. We just want them to think of something cool, right?
Right,
exactly.
But it's the journey. Right?
Yeah, and even in Becoming, there's a section in the rules that says, well, if you don't have a good idea, if you're getting toward the end and don't have a good idea for how to wrap things up and you think somebody else does, maybe throw them the game. Like, throw the game to them and let them do their thing.
Let them figure it out. Cool. Well, this has been pretty good. Do we have any other games or any other points we want to hit before we wrap up?
I think in these, just talking about these games with clear winners/losers. Something I've noticed is when we've been talking about PvP before that, it's always been one person versus another person. And all these are, everyone is together against everyone else. And I think, one, that softens the blow of losing a little bit.
Yeah.
Two, the loser kind of gets to dictate their own terms of, I can see how I lost. I can.
Right.
It doesn't feel as arbitrary as we flipped a coin.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know.
And I guess it's more like losing a board game in that sense than losing a fight on the playground.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what we're really truly what we're getting at here is like in those games where there's a clear winner, there were also lots of losers.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And we enjoyed the journey. Right. And that's the important thing. Cool. Well, that was our podcast. If you would like to get a hold of us, there are several different ways you can do so. We have an email address. It is gauntletpodcast@gmail.com. Please.
Do you remember the website this week?
I do not. Would you like to remind us what it is?
It is gauntletpodcast.libsyn.com.
And Libsyn is LIBSYN.com. That's our website, which where we post nothing, if I'm being honest.
No. It's an RSS feed for this podcast.
That's true.
If you're listening to this already, you probably never need to go to the website.
Right. Yeah. Right. So anyway, if you are going to be in Houston and would like to play a role-playing game with us, good luck. They're mostly full, but you might be able to find something that's not.
If you're planning to be in Houston 6 months from now,
right? Yeah.
A role-playing game.
Yeah. Go RSVP for the future. We are on Meetup. You just Google role-playing games on Meetup, and we pop right up. You should also definitely join our Google Plus community, which is where we have a lot of our conversations about role-playing games. That is, you just go to the community section of Google Plus and search for The Gauntlet, and we will pop right up. That's it. That's our podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jason.
I'm Ferrell.
I'm Dan.
Take care.
Thank you both for having me.
For sure.